y'all are as excited as I am today because we're hosting Gordan Korman, who's a very well-known children's and young adult author, and he's visiting us from New York. He's doing programs for us today and for Trinity Valley School tomorrow. How many of y'all have, at one time or another, in your past school career, read a book by Gordan Korman? So you've got a lot of readers out here. And we're really excited to have you, so I'm going to turn it over to Gordan. He's going to talk to you for a while, and then maybe there will be some time for questions. So welcome, Gordan Korman.
Thank you guys, actually for inviting me back to Country Day. I was here, I think, once right after I graduated college, and then, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago. One of the reasons I think why I get picked to do a lot of like school events like this, you know, I wrote my first book when I was 12. It was actually, true story, my 7th grade English project. In my middle school, honest, the track coach had to teach English. We got him, nice guy, good teacher. He had never taught English in his life at that time. He was a first-year teacher. And when it came to writing, he just sort of didn't know what to tell us to do. And he drew a blank. He stood there saying, okay, work on whatever you want for the rest of the year. So it was February. And from February to June, we had a class period, like 42 minutes every single day, to write one thing. And I got kind of into it, and I started taking it home and working on it at night. And that was when I wrote my first book. It was called This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall. Oh, you know what grade I got? B+. How lame is that? They actually gave me A+, but deducted a grade for messiness. But you know, I got it published. You know Scholastic book orders, right? I was the class monitor for book orders in 7th grade. Back in the 70s, they used to let a kid do it. I mailed my book to the address on the book order forms, right? You're kind of looking at me like, that works? Yeah, kind of. You get lucky. What happened with me was, the guy at Scholastic who opened up my packet found my book, right, which was really just a stack of typed pages. Truth, my mom typed it for me. Read it, liked it, gave it to his boss. She liked it. And a few days after my 13th birthday, so I was in 8th grade by then, I signed a contract for This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall. It still took like a year to come out, but there I was. I was a freshman in high school, and I, you know, had a book in. Guys, I'll be 51 this month, right? So this is like 3/4 of my life ago. That book has been out for more than 36 years. It's been in, you know, French, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Chinese, Japanese, Portuguese, Italian, Korean, Dutch, and Greek. Isn't that wild to see your 7th grade project in Korean, you know, or like Dutch or something? I love looking at my books in other languages. You probably don't know the, you know, like the super old stuff. McDonald Hall is a school, right? So the principal is a guy named Mr. Sturgeon, and his nickname behind his back, everybody calls him the fish. So in French, he becomes Monsieur Sturgeon, and his nickname becomes Caviar, which is, you know, not a translation, right? I mean, sort of, like fish, eggs, fish. But that's if it translates at all, because not everything does. I wrote this book for little kids called Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire. And when Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire was done in French, the book translated okay, but how do you translate a title like that, right? Because Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire is an expression. Very hard to translate any kind of expression because you're not really saying what you mean in the first place. Like, my translator told me to put Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire, word for word into French, would be like calling a book, Teller of Untruths, Your Trousers Have Combusted. And, you know, that sort of blew me back. I knew this guy who worked for Pepsi, and he was like, that's nothing. Remember there was a Pepsi ad where the big slogan was, "Come alive with the Pepsi generation," right? Supposedly, when they translated that into Chinese, it actually turned out to say, "Pepsi brings your ancestors back from the grave." So I don't feel so bad about my little liar line. I have a recent book called Ungifted. It was just done in Spanish. And, you know, because Ungifted is a one-word title, it was just my assumption that you just take the Spanish word for ungifted, and that's what the book is called. There is no Spanish word for ungifted, right? It's not a real thing. The story is about a kid who ends up, like totally non-gifted average kid, who by almost like a mistake ends up in his school district's kind of super genius gifted academy, right? There's no word for ungifted like that. So the book is actually called, in Spanish, Un Chico de lo más normal. I mean, technically, like a kid who is nothing more than normal. Like, nothing more than normal being the closest you can get to ungifted. Yeah. My favorite translation story, though. Do any of you know the 39 Clues books, right? Yeah, so no one author writes 39 Clues, but I'm one of the team that does that. So every 39 Clues book takes place in a different part of the world. And book 8, The Emperor's Code, is China. And there's a character in the story, Jonah Wizard, who's kind of like a rapper / celebrity. So his big slogan is, "Live large with the Wiz generation." Right? He calls himself the Wiz. They have to translate it for the Chinese tour, and it actually turns out to say, "Jonah Wizard makes your ancestors fat." Right? And that is just classic for what happens when you try to translate idiom straight like that. You know, live large, I mean, we know what it means because it's our expression, but you're never going to put that into any other language because really you're just translating the word large. Now, I love doing 39 Clues. I kind of thought at first I would like it less because it's less mine. I think I like it more because it's less mine. I love having coworkers. You know, writing is kind of an alone profession, you know, but creating a series with other people was kind of awesome. You know, one thing about it, whenever you have a chance to really put your stamp on the series, you gotta go for it, because you don't get a ton of chances. Like, I never wrote the first 39 Clues book. That was, you know, Rick Riordan, right, the Lightning Thief, and yeah. So I came in at book 2. But when they did the second series, the Cahills versus Vespers series, they offered me book 1. And I jumped at it because, you know, suddenly it's up to me to decide how the Vespers, are kind of like the Cahills' arch enemies, how do they make their move after, you know, 500 years of waiting in the wings. Okay, check this out. At the same instant, in 7 different time zones around the world, 7 Cahill cousins are kidnapped. So the ransom demands go to Amy and Dan, right there, the main characters. They have to steal these priceless artifacts from museums all around the world and hand them over. Like my book, The Medusa Plot, focuses on a picture of Medusa in a museum in Italy. You know what? If you get a chance later today, have somebody Google Caravaggio's Medusa. That's just the artist's name. You've got to see this picture, okay? It is the most disturbing, hideous, nasty, malevolent, hog-ugly image you have ever seen in your life. Like, it's, first of all, it's painted on a wooden shield, so the curve of the shield makes it look almost like the face is coming out at you. Now, does anybody know in mythology how Medusa was killed?
She was asleep, and so he would look at his shield and
cut her head off, right? Yeah. So the neck is severed, there is blood pouring out, the eyes are wide and staring, the hair, I mean, you know, very hard to have a good hair day when, you know, snakes. But look, the Vespers are not art collectors, right? Their goal is total world domination. How does a picture help you dominate the world? Well, again, that's the next thing as the book one guy that I get to come up with. So I stared at this Medusa for a really long time, and you know what happened? The snakes in the hair, they almost started to look like a map. You know what I mean? Like the long serpentine bodies are the roadways. And I thought, okay, so what if Caravaggio's Medusa is more than a picture? What if it's actually a secret map? And those snakes have been very carefully painted where they are to represent a tunnel system, right? It actually ends up a map of the tunnels underneath the Roman Colosseum. Those words, what if, I think are, you know, pretty clutch words when you're a writer, because all stories, in a way, at their core, are what ifs. What if a 400-year-old painting is a map? You know, what if an ungifted kid ended up in the gifted school? You know, what if, I don't know, kids had to steal back $1 million baseball card that they've been swindled out of? You know, like even true stories that nobody ever made up, they usually work as what ifs. What if the world's largest ocean liner hit an iceberg and sank on its maiden voyage? Sound familiar? I mean, nobody made it up. It totally works as a what if. So, if you ever get writer's block, you know, you just sort of ask yourself, okay, what are the what ifs of my story? Like, I did do a series, like a trilogy, based on the Titanic, right? Kids on the maiden voyage. The what ifs for Titanic were mostly research-based, right? Because it's a true story and, you know, you really have to get your facts straight. So, when the Titanic sank, there were 2,223 passengers and crew aboard. You know how many people got rescued? 706. Which means that more than 2/3 of the people on the Titanic died, right? Well, yes, that's the ending. That's one piece of research. But it kind of underscores everything in the Titanic story, right? Day one, the boat hasn't even left yet. You know, if I'm writing a scene where 3 people are having their luggage loaded into the cargo hold, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, this is great, this is lovely. 5 days from now, 2 of these 3 people are probably going to be dead, right? Which 2? Who lives? Who dies? It all comes from that one little piece of research. You know, I kept thinking about the phrase, we're all in the same boat, just because on the Titanic they weren't. The thing was just so huge that it was almost like being on 6 boats, and depending on where you were or what class you happened to be traveling in, you had a different experience. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this image, right? The Titanic sank head first, right? So, picture this. Hundreds of people are streaming away towards the stern, right? Just to avoid the water. And you kind of have to file that under, it seemed like a good idea at the time, because, you know, again, the image of the Titanic tipping up to the point where it was almost vertical. The people who made it the furthest back, they actually got killed before everybody else. Not of drowning or hypothermia, they just kind of fell, right? I mean, the Titanic tipped up like that is about the same height as the Eiffel Tower. So, you know, can you imagine falling off of that? A few of them made it all the way to the stern and were able to climb up and over and onto the stern itself. And those few people were able to kind of ride the ship down almost like it was an elevator. You know, one guy, real survivor, this is what he wrote in his journal. He timed it perfectly. Just before the stern went under, he stepped off, right? He's wearing a life jacket, so he's got flotation. He didn't even get his hair wet. You know, and that guy actually survived longer in the freezing cold water than anybody else in the Titanic disaster. We can't know for sure, but I think it was because when he first went in, he was never completely submerged. Now, if you were in a different part of the ship, throw all that away. You had a completely different night. They loaded the lifeboats from the top deck, okay? Problem was, not enough lifeboats, right? So all these people were just stranded there, and there was really nothing they could do but just watch the ocean get closer and higher, and eventually it just washed them off. Now, at the base of the first smokestack, there was this ginormous ventilator shaft, right? So the water starts pouring through into the ship through that with such incredible force that all these people were driven underwater and smashed up against the grating. They're trying to swim back up again. They can't move, right? Tens of thousands of gallons per second are pouring over you into the Titanic. They're just, pinned. At that point, every single one of those people was about to drown, okay? You know what happened? Deep within the ship, one of the big boilers, right, like the furnaces, exploded. And it created this huge cloud of steam that shot up through the ship, blasted these guys up off the grating, propelled them all the way up to the surface, and a bunch of them made it onto lifeboats and survived. Okay? I don't care how creative you are, like, no one is going to make that up. That is the kind of plot point that can only come from research. And Titanic just had tons of stuff like that. Not even necessarily finding out about the ship and the sinking, but even just the time period. 100 years ago, right? People were pretty different. All of my other books are contemporary. If I want to find out what people are like today, I just hang out with you guys. Or my own kids. I have a 15-year-old son, a 12-year-old daughter, and a 9-year-old son. I'm always hanging out with them and their friends just to see, what they talk about and also how they talk, right? Like dialogue is a super, I think, cool way to develop characters. Like certainly characters have to talk like real people do. Even something as simple as, how do characters say hello, right? Does he say hi? Does he say yo? Does he say what's up? Does he say how you doing? How are you? I went to high school with this kid. For 4 years, he never once used the word hello. He always used to say greetings. I mean, exactly like that too. Phone rings. Hello? Brief pause. Greetings. None of you know my friend. Don't you have a feeling in the back of your mind for just the kind of doofus we're talking about because of one word? Well, if you can get that much personality from a word, think how much you can get from, all dialogue, right? The FBI says no two fingerprints are alike. Well, I almost look at it as characters have kind of dialogue fingerprints, and not so much what they say as how they say it, and it's awesome for, basically every book that takes place today. But you can't really do much with it on the Titanic, because 100 years ago, no way would they have said the kinds of things that we say. You wouldn't have characters on the Titanic saying, dude, the boat's sinking. What's up with that, man? Legit, that water's mad cold. Ridiculous, right? So what did they say? Well, supposedly there was this one moment where, the ship hadn't really sunk yet, but all the lifeboats were gone, so if you were stuck on it, like you were definitely going into the water. And supposedly one guy turned to the guy next to him and said, "It would appear that we are in rather a tight corner." I was like, are you kidding me? A tight corner? That's it? You just found out that you're going to sink into 28-degree water. You have like a 90% chance of being dead in the next few hours. And the best you can come up with is a tight corner. But that says everything about about, 1912. I mean, they understated everything. We overstayed everything. That's another great advantage of research. And that's not to say everything has to be research. Ideas come from other things, sometimes from real life. Something happens to you, you just got to write about it. But not necessarily. Like I work with Rick Riordan on 39 Clues, and I mean, he doesn't really write from personal experience. He doesn't hang out with Olympian gods on the weekend, but he just has this amazing radar for what's cool. Actually, he used to be a teacher. You know what his favorite thing to teach was? Greek mythology. He thought it was cool, right? But see, that's an amazing lesson for writers like me, just because we all have something that is as cool to us as mythology is to Rick, right? Like, I love old movies, okay? One of my favorite kind of old movies are just these good old-fashioned robbery films, like bank jobs and jewel heists. I love action, So you have to fiddle with the details a little bit. And my what if became, what if they're not stealing something, they're stealing it back? You know what I mean? Like they're stealing back something that is rightfully theirs to begin with. And that's where I got the idea for Swindle, right? A kid finds this really old baseball card, takes it to a collector to see if it's valuable, and the guy just rips him off. Lies, says it's worthless, buys it cheap. Turns out this card is worth like $1 million. Really. I mean, it is the second most valuable old sports card of all time. Does anyone know what number 1 is, by the way? Does the name Honus Wagner kind of ring a bell? There is this 1909 Honus Wagner card that is so super rare that the last time one of them sold at auction in mint condition, it actually went for more than $2 million. So it is possible for certain cards to be worth this kind of money. Problem in Swindle, they don't have it anymore, right? They sold it for peanuts to this sleazy guy. The only way to get it back is to steal it back. There are now 6 books in the Swindle series, actually a 7th on the way. But if you really think about them, they are basically old movie plots kind of reinvented, right? Swindle's a robbery, Zoo Break is a prison break, only instead of, breaking people out of jail, it's animals, kind of mistreated animals from a zoo. Framed is a wrong man story. What if you're accused of a crime, you're innocent, you can't prove it, That's what I love about the series. I can just sort of write about, these old stories that I love, but do it just with my regular group of characters. And whenever you have a chance in school, let's say, to pick your own topic for writing, always pick something you like, because you're going to do a better job if you're writing just what you're psyched about. Last thing you want to be writing is bored. I mean, if you're bored writing, you kind of write boring, and in that way, you're sort of a member of your own audience, right? Because if you can't even entertain yourself, how are you going to entertain a bunch of strangers? And that's one of the things I really focus on, is doing stuff that's going to be fun or different for me, just to keep myself interested, because this is my full-time job. I do this every single day, and I don't want to get bored. My newest series is called The Hypnotist. It's sort of a kid who discovers that he is the world's most powerful natural hypnotist. I kind of got the idea just because I have a friend who is a licensed hypnotherapist in California. He mostly, he puts people under and tries to convince them to overcome their fear of flying, like kind of little stuff like that. But I sort of thought, what if it was an actual kind of paranormal ability? Because that kind of thing, like supernatural power, is something I've never really written about in any of my books. A good chance to do something different. What would it feel like if you could make anybody do anything you wanted them to, just by kind of looking at them in the eye, right? Well, first off, it's awesome, right? I mean, you fail a test, not a problem. You just hypnotize your teacher and raise your grade to an A+. Or, you don't like broccoli? No problem. You just hypnotize your dad, or your mom, or whoever's in charge of the menu, and no broccoli. But, power is never easy, right? And there's always a price to using power. And I realized that this paranormal thing is a little more complicated than I thought. I needed to work out the rules of how hypnotism works. And once I've got those rules, I got to follow them, almost like they're science, like the science of the Titanic sinking, or climbing Mount Everest, or some of the other stuff I'd written about. So, for example, when I hypnotize you, okay, part of my mind enters your mind. I can even see out your eyes. You know what it looks like? It looks like that sort of little picture-in-picture, from YouTube. You're watching some guy play video games, and you see him in the little corner in the square. Now, the longer I stay inside your mind, your memories start to seep down into my memories. This is very complicated and dangerous, because you could start to forget where I stop and you start, right? Especially if you hypnotize someone older than you. Jax, the main character, he's 12. If he hypnotizes somebody 40, 40 years of memories can kind of seep down into a 12-year-old brain, and they can really overwhelm, the memories that are already there. The second hypnotist book came out called Memory Maze, and Jax is hired by this eccentric, dying billionaire to hypnotize him. Guy's 96, okay? 96 years of memories is way more than he can handle. Plus, think about what a 96-year-old has been through. This guy was in D-Day, right? Like storming the beaches at Normandy. So suddenly here's 12-year-old Jax with this memory of, slogging up on the beach with bullets whipping by and people getting killed all around it, bombs blowing up, and, amphibious landing craft sinking and exploding and whatever. That's why it's a memory maze, because you can really get lost in all that memory. Last thing that's tricky, how do you continue to live your own life as a normal kid with this power, right? So I just want to read you guys a little sample. This is from the first hypnotist book. Jax is trying to explain to his best friend that he actually has this ability. His friend doesn't believe him, so he is challenged to hypnotize, to prove it by hypnotizing the head cheerleader in the cafeteria line. Tommy indicated a tall, slender brunette 2 places ahead of them in line. Hypnotize Lisa Sweeney. Can't hurt to have an 8th grade cheerleader in your power. Dr. Mako's lecture replayed itself in Jax's mind. You must never use hypnotism for frivolous purposes. But this wouldn't be frivolous. Jax had to convince his best friend that all this was real. He focused his attention on the tall girl's pretty profile, which was a little hard at first, since Lisa was looking at the salad bar, not at him. Slowly but surely, he worked her gaze over in his direction. He had her. She glared at him. Go stalk somebody else, dweeb. Tommy laughed in his face. You did it, man. You hypnotized her into insulting you. Jax was bewildered. He could feel the connection, could even see the picture-in-picture image of himself from another point of view. But it couldn't be Lisa. All at once, Tommy squeezed his arm. Look. As the cheerleader picked up her tray and moved on, they could both see the lunch lady on the other side of the salad bar, unmoving, her eyes fixed on Jax. If anyone had ever been in a hypnotic trance, it was her. Dude, Tommy hissed. You zonked out the lunch lady. Jax couldn't contain a goofy grin. Okay, she wasn't exactly who he'd been aiming for, but he'd done it. Not by accident, but right out here in the real world. Okay, Tommy rubbed his hands together. What are we going to make her do? Nothing. I'm not allowed to use hypnotism for frivolous purposes. This isn't frivolous, Tommy insisted. It's awesome. Make her bark like a dog. Forget it, Tommy. She works here. How would you feel if she got fired for not doing her job? So, make her do something that's part of her job then, Tommy wheedled. She never puts enough gravy on the Salisbury steak. She holds on to the stuff like it's her own blood. Make her give me a decent amount. And on the mashed potatoes, too. That's not frivolous. That's customer satisfaction. Jax looked his friend in the eye. Just gravy? And maybe a free chocolate chip cookie? No way. You get what you paid for and nothing more. Well, this was definitely not what Dr. Mako had in mind. But so long as the command never went beyond serving lunch, it should be okay. When Jax reached the salad bar, he leaned over the sneeze guard into the lunch lady's face and murmured, "My friend here likes a lot of gravy. Make sure you give him as much as you can. When the next bell rings, you will remember nothing of this conversation." He got his own lunch and carried it to an empty table. The first bite had not yet reached his lips when the commotion started up from the food line. "Okay, that's enough. I'm good. Stop." A moment later, Tommy appeared, his tray dripping gravy. The lunch lady was right behind him, a ladle in one hand and the gravy pot in the other. "Opus, help! Hit the off switch!" "Stop," Jack said urgently. But the woman continued to follow Tommy, spooning ladle after ladle onto his swamped tray. Jax realized in alarm that the hypnotic link between them no longer existed. All that remained was his command, "Give him as much as you can." He felt rising panic. All around the cafeteria, kids were interrupting their lunches to watch the great gravy chase. The general murmur of surprise turned to a cheer as excess gravy poured over the side. A passing sneaker slid in the puddle and a sixth grader went down. It got a round of applause from the cafeteria crowd, turned into a standing ovation as his flying meal sprayed soup over a wide area. "How about a little help here?" Tommy cried. At that moment, the bell rang. Instantly, the lunch lady took her ladle and her pot and quietly returned to her post. It was obvious that she had no memory of the ruckus that had just ended. Tommy set down his tray with a splash and looked at his food floating in an ocean of brown. "Okay," I admitted. "You're a hypnotist, all right. The worst hypnotist in the world, but you could definitely do it." Jax made a face. "Be quiet and drink your lunch." Little bit. So we have a little bit of time. If you guys have any questions or if there's anything that I did not talk about that you want me to, go for it.
What's been your favorite character to develop in a story?
Oh, I don't know. I sort of like them all. I wrote a book called Schooled, and the main character of Schooled is this kid, Capricorn Anderson, and he's basically a 13-year-old hippie, right? I mean, like, he was not alive in the 60s, you know, but he was raised in total isolation on the hippie commune his grandma formed in 1967. So here's this 13-year-old kid who was, you know, never tasted pizza and never watched TV and never had a haircut. And, you know, but it's almost like, you know, he gets to school as an 8th grader and they show him his locker and he can't figure out what it's supposed to be for because he's never really owned anything, right? Like on a hippie commune, you share everything. So what would be the point of locking something away? It's almost like his mind is wired completely different than everybody else's. And he was just an awesome and a lot of fun character to play around.
What's your favorite book that you've written?
It's a great question. I really don't have a favorite book. I mean, I tend to get the most excited about what's newest, just because I'm working on it now, you know, not because it's better than all the others. So, you know, Hypnotist is very recent for me. If you're a 39 Clues fan, the last book of the latest series, the Unstoppable series, Flashpoint, is one of mine. And I have a new series starting in February called Masterminds that I'm really, really excited about. But I don't think those are better than the others. They're just sort of what my current focus is on the most.
Is it hard to write multiple books at a time? Because that's kind of what, like, writing the 39 Clues and then also having the Hypnotist series and the new series. of
It's a good
February.
point. Well, I am sort of working on books at the same time, but I'm really only writing one of them at a time, kind of in first draft. So what happens is I'm writing a book now, and the last book is coming through revision. So I have to sort of stop this and work on that. In the meantime, I'm planning the next book. So I'm not really writing 3 books at the same stage at the same time, but it is really hard to shift. I'll tell you the things that really throw you is tenses, right? Like Masterminds is written in the present tense, and it's really hard to switch from the present tense to the past tense to work on something else. When I was working on Titanic, it was really, really hard to switch out of 1912 language into modern language, you know, so you don't end up with "dude, the boat's sinking," you know, on your Titanic. Little things like that are very, very hard to shift. You know, and I think there's also a tendency when you're writing 39 Clues that everything is, you know, high stakes. You're constantly writing the entire future of humanity depends on this, you know, and life and death being at stake every minute like that sometimes is a hard kind of mode to shift out of.
Have you ever like drawn a blank when writing a book and just had to stop writing it?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you write as well? Just because it's something that happens to writers a lot, that you're just working on something and you get bored. I mean, I would say that if you get bored writing a book, it's probably not boredom. Like you would get reading somebody else's book or watching a bad movie or something like that. I think if you do get bored writing a book, it's time to re-examine what the plan is. You know, it's possible. Like I would treat it not so much as a need to stop as a need to rethink where I am, and you know, why will readers care about this book? You know, if I don't care, you know, how are readers going to care? You know, so I think that getting bored is actually a really instructive warning sign when you're writing a book that you're just on the wrong track. Okay, can I just do one more?
Sure.
Last question. Yeah.
What encouraged you to finish the book when you were 12 years old?
Oh, well, I actually finished it in school, right? We had school time. We had something like 4.5, 5 months. Actually, that book is in your library. So if you're interested in that 7th grade project, the book is called "This Can't Be Happening at McDonald Hall." Every chapter of that book is 1 week's work in my 7th grade project. I mean, there really is not much of a shifting around. And if you really look at it, I mean, it's good, but if you read one chapter of that book, you're not going to think, no way a 7th grader wrote this in 1 week. Like, it's a very doable book. You know, it's not hugely long. It's, I mean, I'm really proud of it, but I really think that a lot of 7th graders, in the right circumstances, with the right amount of time, could come up with something kind of comparable. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for inviting me back.